The universe's desperate cry. The galaxy was burning. Across dozens of star systems, entire planets had gone silent. What was once a thriving civilization had turned into lifeless husks, floating in the void. The enemy was ruthless, unstoppable. The Vrake swarm, a species without mercy, without hesitation. They moved like a plague, consuming everything in their path. The Galactic Council watched in horror. From their grand station orbiting the core of the galaxy, leaders from hundreds of alien races gathered, their faces filled with fear. "We are losing," an old Silver general whispered, his voice trembling. "Our fleets are gone. Our defenses crumble before their advance. If we do nothing, we will all be extinct within the next cycle." A heavy silence filled the grand chamber. Every race had tried. The Kelvari, known for their energy shields, shattered in hours. The Threx Dominion, the strongest warriors in the galaxy, slaughtered like cattle. The Tarsheen, the most intelligent species, outwitted at every turn. There was no one left to call for help, except for one species, one that the Council had always feared, one they had always kept at a distance, watching from the shadows. Humans. "They are not ready," hissed a reptilian diplomat, his scales dark with worry. "They are reckless, unpredictable. If we bring them into this war, we may never control them again." "But we have no other choice," another council member argued. "If we do nothing, the Vrake will consume us all. The humans may be dangerous, but they are warriors. They know war better than anyone." The chamber erupted into debate. Some wanted to take the risk. Others were terrified of what would happen if the humans won. Then, Supreme Chancellor Overen, leader of the council, raised his hand. Silence fell once more. With a slow, heavy breath, he spoke the words that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. "Send the distress signal. Call the humans. The message reaches Earth. On a quiet night, far away from the galactic chaos, Earth's skies remained peaceful. The world, untouched by the war beyond its solar system, continued as it always had. Deep within Luna Base, a human military outpost on the moon, Commander Jonas Hayes stood in front of a massive screen. The distress signal had arrived just moments ago. The message was simple, a plea for help, a desperate request from a galaxy on the edge of destruction. Jonas stared at the transmission, his expression unreadable. His second-in-command, Captain Elena Torres, read through the data, her fingers tapping against the metal console. "They're finished," she murmured. "The Vrake have crushed every major civilization. No one has been able to stop them." Jonas exhaled, crossing his arms. "And now, they want us to fix their mess." Elena turned to face him. "What do you think?" Jonas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the holographic map of the galaxy, watching as system after system fell to the swarm. Finally, he spoke. "Prepare the fleet." The Council's shock. Less than an hour after sending the distress call, the Galactic Council's screens lit up with a response. The humans had answered. A holographic image of Commander Hayes flickered into view. The aliens in the chamber leaned forward, expecting negotiations, conditions, hesitation. Instead, they got 3 words. "Stand by for war." Murmurs filled the room. Some gasped. Others froze in place. The humans did not ask questions. They did not demand alliances, payment, or diplomacy. They only prepared for battle. An old Silver general turned to the Supreme Chancellor. His voice was quiet, filled with something the Council had not felt in a long time. Hope. "Do you think they can win?" Overan did not answer. He only watched as the human warships began to move. And deep in the void, the Vrake swarm continued its march, unaware that, for the first time, they were now the hunted. The arrival of humanity's fleet. The void of space was silent, as it always was. Planets burned. Fleets crumbled. The Vrake swarm moved like an unstoppable tide, consuming everything in its path. The galaxy had fought, begged, and bled. Nothing had stopped the horror. And then the humans arrived, a shadow over the stars. From the outer edges of the war-torn sectors, something new appeared. It did not come with the desperate retreat of broken fleets or the chaotic distress signals of dying civilizations. It came with discipline. It came with purpose. Thousands of warships emerged from the void, each bearing the insignia of unified Terran command. Unlike the sleek vessels of the Galactic Council or the towering dreadnoughts of the Threx Dominion, human ships were brutal, efficient, and built for one thing: war. They were not elegant, they were not graceful, but they were terrifying. Massive armored hulls, bristling with weaponry, moved in perfect formation. Their engines burned cold, calculating, precise. They did not hesitate. They did not falter. In the heart of the fleet, aboard the dreadnought Hellspear, Commander Jonas Hayes stood at the command deck. His officers waited for his orders. His soldiers stood ready. And before them, on the edge of their long-range scanners, the Vrake swarm stirred, millions of living warships spreading across the void like a plague. Jonas exhaled slowly. His voice was calm. Begin the attack. The Council watches in shock. From their grand station orbiting the galactic core, the alien leaders of the Council watched. They had expected diplomacy. They had expected negotiations. What they saw instead was annihilation. The first engagement lasted less than 15 minutes. Human warships did not move like other fleets. They did not engage in careful formations, nor did they waste time on defensive strategies. They struck with overwhelming force, tearing into the swarm before it even had time to react. Energy weapons flared. Railguns screamed through the darkness. Each human battleship fought like a cornered beast, relentless, brutal, and unafraid to take damage if it meant destroying the enemy. The Vrake, creatures that had torn through the strongest armies in the galaxy, hesitated for the first time in their existence. Their endless, mindless charge was met with something they had never encountered before. A force more ruthless than their own. A species that did not fear extinction. The humans did not retreat. They did not defend. They only attacked. Terror in the swarm. Deep within the vast, living ships of the Vrake, something happened that had never occurred in their history. The swarm felt fear. For centuries, they had fed on weakness, crushing all resistance. But now, they were the ones being torn apart. Their ships burned, their hives collapsed, their warriors fell silent. They had faced power before. They had faced strength. But they had never faced madness. The madness of a species that fought as if it had nothing to lose. The madness of humanity. The final order. On the bridge of Hellspear, Jonas Hayes watched as the Vrake struggled to adapt. They were fast. They were strong. But they were not human. The battle was already decided. Jonas turned to his weapons officer. His voice was quiet. Cold. Launch the payload. From the depths of the human fleet, something monstrous awakened. A weapon designed for one purpose. A planet-breaker torpedo. It fired in silence, moving toward the Vrake's central hive ship. The moment it struck, the void ignited. A brilliant explosion tore through the swarm's ranks. The hive ship, massive, ancient, undefeated, was obliterated in a single instant. The Vrake, for the first time, knew what it was to lose. As their forces scattered in confusion, Jonas simply watched, his expression unreadable. "Tell the Council," he said. "The war has begun. Humanity's wrath unleashed." The galaxy had seen war. It had witnessed empires rise and fall, civilizations burn, and tyrants crushed under the weight of rebellion. But it had never seen what came next. The Vrake's desperation. The swarm was in chaos. Their greatest hive ship had been destroyed, their formations shattered. It was the first true defeat they had ever known, and their instincts screamed for retreat. But the humans did not stop. They pursued. They hunted. The war was no longer a battle of fleets. It was an extermination. Across the void, The Vrake sent out distress signals to their remaining strongholds. Messages pulsed through the cold vacuum, begging for reinforcements, pleading for something, anything, that could stop the human onslaught. But there was no answer. Because the humans had already planned ahead. Planetfall. A different kind of war. On the Vrake stronghold world of Calath-9, the skies burned. Vrake ground forces, vast and monstrous, had always been the terror of the galaxy. Their towering biotitans and endless legions had crushed countless armies. No species had ever dared invade them. Until now. The first human drop pods slammed into the surface like falling stars. They did not land softly. They did not hesitate. They crashed into the battlefield with the force of meteor strikes, their reinforced hulls tearing through alien fortifications before they even opened. Then the hatches burst apart, and out stepped the Terran shock troopers. Power armor-clad soldiers. Advanced weaponry. Cold, unshaken eyes. The Vrake, who had crushed 1,000 armies, saw something that filled them with pure horror. Humans fighting on foot, with the same terrifying, relentless brutality as their ships. And worst of all, they were smiling. The reckoning. The first engagement lasted less than 2 hours. 2 hours. That was all it took for the first major city to fall. The Vrake, accustomed to breaking their enemies with numbers, found themselves outmatched. They had more soldiers. They had more firepower. They had more defenses. But humans had one thing they did not. Madness. Vrake warriors watched in disbelief as humans charged into overwhelming odds, refusing to break. Even when wounded, they kept fighting. Even when outnumbered, they held their ground. And when they fell, they laughed, spat blood, and pulled their enemies down with them. Vrake commanders screamed orders, demanding their warriors to adapt, regroup, fight smarter. But it was too late, because this was not a battle anymore. This was a message. The Council's horror. From their distant chambers, the Galactic Council watched the war unfold. They had once dismissed humanity, a small, reckless species from an insignificant planet, too emotional, too aggressive. Now, they watched in stunned silence as the Vrake, the terror of the galaxy, was being torn apart. One by one, their fleets were crushed. One by one, their planets fell. It was unlike any war the galaxy had ever seen. Humans did not just defeat their enemies. They broke them. They did not simply fight the Vrake. They hunted them. And the worst part, the humans were just getting started. Final order. No mercy. On the bridge of Hellspear, Commander Jonas Hayes stood before a holographic map. The Vrake had begun to flee, abandoning their own worlds, their own people. They had never known fear. Now, they only knew fear. Jonas watched them run. His expression did not change. He turned to his officers. His voice was calm. No survivors. The last stand of the swarm. The Vrake had ruled the stars for centuries. Their fleets had crushed entire civilizations. Their armies had slaughtered billions. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. Until humanity arrived. Until they learned what true predators were. Now, they were no longer conquerors. They were prey. The Vrake's last fortress, deep in the Salvora Nebula, hidden behind layers of shifting ion storms, lay the Vrake Prime Fortress, their last desperate holdout. The remaining Vrake commanders gathered, their towering insectoid frames twitching with unease. The war had turned into a nightmare. The swarm, once endless, had been butchered. And the worst part, the humans weren't slowing down. Every intercepted transmission spoke of more fleets, more armies, more weapons. Humanity had done something no species had ever dared to do. They were not negotiating. They were not offering surrender. They were not stopping until the Vrake were erased. "We must fight to the last," one of the warlords hissed, slamming a clawed fist against the war table. "We are the swarm. We are eternal. We will drown them in our numbers." Silence followed. The other commanders stared. They all knew the truth. Numbers meant nothing against humans, because humans did not fight wars the way the galaxy expected. They fought to win, no matter the cost. And they had one last move to play: the shadow of Earth. Above the nebula, the human fleet arrived. Thousands of ships emerged from hyperspace, their hulls painted black against the void, their weapons glowing with the power of planet-killing firepower. At the center of the armada was the behemoth-class dreadnought, UNS Titanfall, a warship so massive it blocked out the light from a nearby star. Inside the command deck, Admiral Victoria Kane stood at the helm, her expression unreadable. "No more games," she said. "No more running. We end this now." The order was given. The weapons powered up, and the sky turned to fire. The siege of Vrake Prime. The humans did not attack with caution. They did not probe defenses. They did not waste time. They rained destruction from the heavens, unleashing a bombardment so devastating that the surface of Vrake Prime began to crack apart. The Vrake, desperate and cornered, launched everything they had: missiles, bioweapons, plasma cannons. But the human warships did not retreat. They pushed forward, through the storm of enemy fire, through the chaos of a dying world, through everything the Vrake threw at them. They advanced like reapers of death, unrelenting, unstoppable. On the ground, the last remaining Vrake warriors prepared for their final stand. Their once glorious empire had fallen. Their hives were in ruins. And now, the monsters that had hunted them across the galaxy were descending upon them one last time. The sky above them split apart as human dropships roared through the burning atmosphere. The end had come. No surrender, no mercy. Admiral Kane watched the battlefield unfold. Her officers awaited orders. "What are your commands, Admiral?" She exhaled slowly. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's firepower, but now it would witness their vengeance. Her voice was calm. "Burn it all." And the last battle began. The fall of Vrake Prime. The Vrake had once believed they were the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Now, their final stronghold burned. The storm breaks. From orbit, the human fleet unleashed its wrath. Orbital strikes, railgun rounds, EMP storms. The planet below trembled under the relentless assault. The defenses of Vrake Prime crumbled. But humanity was not here to simply bombard from afar. They came to finish the job. From the belly of UNS Titanfall, thousands of drop pods launched. Metallic coffins filled with humanity's deadliest warriors. They fell through the flames, cutting through the burning sky like comets of war. And when they landed, hell itself arrived. The last war cry. In the ruined streets of the Vrake capital, the surviving swarm warriors gathered. Their exoskeletons were cracked, their weapons overheated, their leaders dead or fleeing. But they had one thing left: desperation. The Vrake did not surrender. They would fight until the last breath. As the first human soldiers emerged from the smoke, the Vrake screamed their war cry and charged. Their claws slashed. Their plasma rifles fired. They expected the humans to flinch, to hesitate, to fear. But the moment they looked into human eyes, they saw nothing but cold, merciless resolve. And that was when the Vrake finally understood. They were already dead. The apex predators. The first wave of humans tore through the Vrake like a storm of metal and blood. Exosuit soldiers moved like shadows, dodging plasma fire with inhuman speed. Juggernauts stomped forward, their armor absorbing everything thrown at them. And behind them, the Ghost Division arrived. These were not ordinary humans. These were hunters. They had trained in the deadliest environments, survived battles no other species would dare fight. They did not fire recklessly. They did not waste bullets. Every shot was a kill. The Vrake thought they could overwhelm them. But against humans, numbers meant nothing. Because humans did not fight to survive. They fought to win. The end of a civilization. As the last remnants of the Vrake army collapsed, a single message echoed through the human command channels. Admiral Kane, the Vrake homeworld is ours. The swarm is no more. The war was over, but Admiral Kane gave no victory speech. She merely stared at the burning world below. This was what happened when humanity was forced into war. They did not conquer. They did not enslave. They erased. A warning to every species in the universe. Do not start a war with humanity, because there would be no one left to end it. The aftermath of fire and fury. The war was over. The Vrake were no more. But the universe would never be the same. A silent battlefield. Vrake Prime, once the heart of a mighty empire, was now a graveyard. The skies were choked with smoke. The ground was nothing but craters and ruins. The air, once filled with the deafening screeches of the swarm, was now silent. Among the wreckage, human soldiers walked through the ashes. They were not cheering, not celebrating. They simply observed. This was the cost of war, and humanity had paid it willingly. The broadcast that shook the galaxy. Across the stars, the fall of the Vrake spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council received the first images of Vrake Prime's destruction. Leaders of dozens of civilizations gathered in horror as they watched the footage. The Vrake cities erased from the planet's surface. The swarm's once mighty armies reduced to shadows in the dust. Human warships hovering like silent reapers, their weapons still glowing hot from the devastation. A hushed voice broke the silence in the council chambers. They didn't just win. They erased an entire species. Fear spread like wildfire. If humanity could do this to the most feared empire in the galaxy, what would they do to anyone who crossed them next? The warning from Earth. From the bridge of U.S. Titanfall, Admiral Victoria Kane prepared a message. A message not just for the survivors of the war, but for every species that still existed. Her face appeared on every galactic broadcast. Her voice was calm, steady, absolute. This war was never our choice, but when the universe needed saving, we answered. Make no mistake, we do not seek conquest. We do not seek war. Her eyes turned ice cold. But if another threat rises, if another species dares to bring death to our doorstep, she leaned forward. We will answer again, and next time, you won't have time to beg. Then she cut the transmission. The message was clear. Humanity was not the enemy. But if pushed into war again, there would be no mercy. The universe holds its breath. For the first time in history, the galaxy feared a single species. The Vrake had ruled through terror. But humanity, they didn't rule. They warned. And that was far, far worse. Because now, every empire, every council, every warlord who had once mocked humans knew the truth. Humanity was the fire that burned civilizations to ash. And if the galaxy was wise, it would never let that fire rise again. The shadow of humanity. The war was over. The galaxy was silent. But humanity's shadow stretched far beyond the battlefield. A galaxy in fear. For centuries, the Galactic Council had played politics with war. Empires had risen and fallen. Species had fought and rebuilt. But never like this. The Vrake were not just defeated. They were erased. Entire civilizations froze in terror as they watched how effortlessly humanity had ended an empire that had once terrorized them all. If they can do this to the Vrake, what happens if we're next? For the first time in history, the galaxy was afraid to fight. Wars stopped overnight. Conflicts that had raged for decades vanished in silence. Even the most aggressive warlords hesitated, their fleets quietly retreating from disputed systems. Because now, every leader understood one brutal, undeniable truth. There was no surviving a war with humanity. The ghosts of Vrake Prime, but not all feared them. Some watched. Some studied. In the deepest reaches of the galaxy, unseen by human eyes, a new power stirred. They had remained hidden through the war, watching in silence as humanity unleashed its wrath. To them, the Vrake were always expendable. A test. And now, they had their answer. Humanity was far more dangerous than they had expected. But even the strongest predators have weaknesses, and in the ruins of Vrake Prime, where no human dared to linger, the shadows moved. A lone signal. On the bridge of the U.S. Titanfall, Admiral Victoria Kane stood staring into the void. The war was won. The mission was over. And yet, something felt wrong. "Commander, are all sectors clear?" A short pause. Then the officer's voice replied, "Yes, Admiral. The fleet confirms. No remaining threats detected." Kane frowned. Then why did it feel like someone was still watching? A notification flickered on her screen. A faint, almost imperceptible energy signal had been detected deep in the Vrake ruins. Something small, something weak, but something alive. Kane's eyes narrowed. The Vrake were gone. So who was left to send a signal? She turned to her officers. "Get me a recon team. Now." A darker threat awaits. Humanity had saved the galaxy. They had crushed the greatest threat known to the stars. But in the shadows, something else had been watching. Something patient. Something ancient. And now, as humanity stood victorious, believing themselves the strongest force in the universe, the true enemy was finally ready to step into the light.